Hey, thanks for joining us here on the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections podcast, the show that's bringing you coaches and behind the scenes folks from around the world in our great sport. And I'm super excited to welcome our guest today. Help me welcome Mr. Ernest Moss. Ernest, how are you, sir?
Hey, man, I'm blessed and highly favored, man. Glad to be on this side of the earth.
That's right, man. How's life? You're at Tiffin University in beautiful Ohio. How's it going over there?
Yes, sir. It's going pretty good. We're open up full time. We're doing the hybrid schedule. So we're doing in-person teaching as well as in-person coaching. We started out with the same, I believe, progression that most people did with smaller groups in the classroom. If your class is bigger than 14, we kind of chop that in half a little bit. And then if we're coaching, we started with groups of 9 and then kind of progressively worked our way up through the progression and the CDC guidelines.
I coached for 10 years before I came over to this side, and certainly here on the, specifically track and field equipment manufacturing side, there's some issues with schools closing down and no seasons and things like that. But I can't imagine being a coach right now. It's normally a tough thing to do, right? I mean, the scheduling and processes and stuff like that. And now having these smaller groups, I've heard of like almost pods, like you had to coach the same 4 or 5 kids together because they live together. It doesn't matter what event area they are in and things like that. That's just got to be, you've added a lot of complexity on an already complex sport to coach.
Yeah, true. I mean, but I think also as coaches, I think we're in a very unique situation. Like we're in a profession where we deal with a lot of uncertainty on a daily basis. Even though we may put plans in place, whether it's a workout plan, whether it's a meet itinerary, whether it's a meet schedule, a travel itinerary, anything can happen. And so, I take a line from a great mentor friend of mine, George Williams, who said, it's about takeaways and bonuses. So you always approach the day with, at the end of the day, it's like playing par golf. If you have not that many takeaways and a lot of bonuses, hey, that's playing par golf. So to try and get a birdie, yeah, that's great. But the expectation is just to try and play par golf.
Right. Yeah, that's good. And boy, if you're going to listen to anybody, listen to George. What a legend, has done it all and continues to do it all, man. Love that guy. Yeah, you're right. Coaches, we're so used to doing so much with so little and being so flexible. We definitely do have, I think, the advantage going into something like this pandemic where, okay, I don't want to call it just another day because this is different than what we've ever had. However, maybe track coaches specifically are the most prepared to be unprepared. Does that make sense?
Pretty much, especially when you go into those first few meets outdoor season.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. The transition and weather and location and what have you. Absolutely. Well, man, Ernest, I tell you, you and I have been talking actually for the last few weeks. Really excited to chop it up with you today about some coaching progressions and coaching career progressions. Not necessarily, we're not going to take a long jumper through beginning to 20-foot plus long jumper. We're going to talk about, coaching career progressions and coaching mentality today. Before we get on that subject, why don't we take a step back and learn a little bit more about you and your athletic and coaching background. I know you're a Western Carolina grad, an alum from Western Carolina.
Yeah, we get the W going. The W going.
See, I would just do the C. That's easier for me. I would just
it's colorway. Cherokee for swoop and vulture.
That's right. Are you from that area originally, or where did you go high school and track and all that?
Yeah, I'm originally from the Piedmont, Rowan County, and I was born and raised in Salisbury, North Carolina, but went to North Rowan High School. Some people have heard of that school, some people haven't.
You went to North Rowan.
Class of 95. So 94, 95, I believe in 95, we scored 148 points at the state meet. So I don't know if that was a record number of points or not, but we scored in every single event that we qualified in.
Is North Rowan, and maybe I'm mixing up with another school. I know of North Rowan, but is that triple jump high? Is that where who was the really good triple jumper ended up going to Indiana? I thought he was from North.
Yeah, that's really good. So we've been fortunate enough to have 5 national high school champions to come out of there in the triple jump. We had Brian Ellis, we had Greg Yeldell, we had Andre Tillman, who was a 2-time champion. Brian Ellis broke the high school record, and then Greg Yeldell turned around and broke the triple jump high school record prior to going to Indiana. So yeah, we call it the airport in terms of football, but I also think that you can call it the airport for jumping. We had a pretty good history of, I think we had about 48 guys jump over 48 feet come out of there.
Holy cow. Who was there one single coach that did all that, or was there a string of
Robert A. Steele Jr.?
Wow. What was his background? Why such a deep success specifically in those events?
He studied. If you ever, the funny was when people saw us jumping, but then they met our coach. Our coach was an offensive lineman, so he was about 315 plus pounds, and so yeah. So there's some kind of old school pictures out there of us jumping on the old band directors boxes and everything before the nice plyo boxes that are out there now for kids to jump on or train on. And so, we just did a lot of hard work. He learned the event. He was able to individualize a lot of different things for us. We did the old school writing down the workouts, no computers, tear off a piece of paper, give you a piece of paper, here's your workout. We each had a little piece of paper about that big. I still have a couple pieces that, just got to kind of store his memorabilia, but no, he was a great guy. He talked to us a little bit, and we also had experience of running AAU, summer track well before it really exploded. I was a charter member of Rowing Express, but we kind of were a phalange off of the national recognized Durham Striders.
Oh yeah, right. Wow, that's amazing. So were you a jumper? Were you part of that jumps crew?
I was a long jump, triple jumper, hurler. I may still be on the county all-time list, at least maybe in the top 10, maybe. I was a small jumper, though. I was like 5'6", 152 pounds, and I was jumping close to 48 feet and 22 feet.
Wow. Well, and compare that, of all those great names that you mentioned, I knew Greg because I worked Indiana University camps in the summer, so I got to meet Greg and stuff like that. He looked like a wide receiver, like a bulked out wide receiver. Like he had to have played football, right?
He did. So he actually was a strong safety on that team at Randall L.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So when Indiana had that, before this was it Tom Freeze, I guess is the coach there now. Before that team, he was there, and he had a great coach that I ended up meeting later on. But Greg was a freshman when I was a senior. So my coach, of course, he could not jump around and bound and everything. He had a couple good knee surgeries, so he actually asked me to go and work with Greg. So I was very fortunate to work with Greg. Tasha Farley went to Alabama.
Yeah.
I know you know about the Barnes-Smith twins went to NC State, and Brian Ellison went out to Arizona State.
Wow, man, that's so cool. I love that. I love that history there. Like I said, as soon as you said North Rowan, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Those guys were awesome. So you ended up going to Western Carolina. You had a good career there. When did the actual profession of coaching kind of enter your mind? Did you always, growing up through high school, think you were going to be a coach, or when did that start triggering for you?
I've always kind of been in certain things, just kind of working with people, and didn't really realize that my path was being charted right before my eyes without me even knowing about it. So when I was in my 5th year at Western, after coming off of a hip surgery and was rehabbing there, I was able to refine my love and my passion, because I've been running since I was 12 years old. So, you get up to around 22, 23, I mean, usually about 10, 11 years. Yeah, it's a very long career. So, I came back because I wanted to come back. And in the midst of that, I still have a little bit of controversy about slip valves, and how we look at slip valves. I mean, and that rule goes back and forth, of course, outside of, now it's breaking the plane. But, I was always close to hitting the B mark for US's, and for nationals. Before they had the 48, going into the regions, we only had 2 marks, and then you get on that provisional list and that was it. So it's a little bit tougher, right? And so now, I said, well, let me have a chance to go ahead and, chase the mark. I was still in pretty good shape and was lean and was still excited. So I kept hearing about, grad assistant, not thinking nothing about a master's degree really. But I was like, hey, I can go ahead and get a degree while I'm still training, because I was just trying to find a way to pay for bills while I was training, and ended up going up to Sacred Heart in Fairfield, Connecticut. And I really didn't think about coaching until I lifted my head up about 15 years in my career. And I was like, yeah, seriously.
Huh, that's interesting. So you mentioned grad school, and this was a topic I wanted to make sure I asked you about. So doing my research on you, your undergrad, I respect it so much, because it was communications with public relations, which I was a communications and public relations major. So maybe that's why you and I have always kind of clicked since we've known each other. So we have that same background. However, first of all, I was done with school as soon as I got my undergrad. There was never a thought of going to grad school and all that kind of stuff, man. I barely made it out with a sheet of paper from my undergrad. So I was done. You went on, I love it that you went on and got a master's degree. You might have the most interesting master's degree I've ever heard of. So I'm going to try to say it out loud. You correct me where I get wrong. So you have a master's of psychology, gifted and talented and multiple intelligences.
Yeah,
What is that? Besides, it sounds like you studied, I was going to make a joke and say that you studied me, multiple and gifted and talented, but
sure.
you didn't study me. What does that mean? What is the multiple gifted, talented intelligences under a psychology major?
It was it's pretty unique, really. All that falls under the MAT, the Master of Art in Teaching. So when I was looking at grad assistant positions and understanding sometimes how schools in the Northeast start in September as opposed to August in the Southeast, I had to get let into a program on probation just because they have a chance to take the MCATs, anything like that. So when I got let into the program, once again, still was like, hey, I just want to get into the program. I want to get this job, not more so, hey, I want to pursue this degree, right? And then in the midst of it, they said, well, because of how early that program was, it was transitioning from a commuter school to a resident school. They said, well, usually our program is designed for you to do a subject year for 4 years, and then you spend your last year and a half doing your student teaching and learning some of the other things to pursue your master's. So one of those 5-year programs, correct?
Right.
So they said, you can pretty much design your own degree. I said, no problem. So my inspiration, one of my major inspirations for running track, as well as getting my master's degree, believe it or not, and she's not here on this earth anymore, is my older sister, Karina Moss. And
Okay.
she was actually, now when we look at the research, she was went from being a manic depressive to being bipolar 1 and schizophrenic. And so I pursued my master's in the midst of trying to understand my sister.
Wow.
We'll talk about the whole word understanding later on. So like I said, my path was being charted without me even knowing it. And so before she really passed on, we had a conversation, and she always was, not so much envious of my career, but she was always admired my career. And so I just told her, I said, you were the sole reason why I went to run track, and you were the sole reason that introduced me. She introduced me to Coach Steele. So it wasn't like I just heard about Coach Steele. She introduced me to Coach Steele. Like I said, I was an eighth grader when I met Coach Steele at 13 years old. And so now, like, these 13-year-olds now know everything, right? They know your stats. But going there and getting introduced to the world of track and field. My dad was a great athlete, didn't know about him. My uncle was a great athlete, didn't know about it till I was 30 years old. So the traditional kind of raising up in the Black household, keeping secrets, because everybody played football, flunked out. I never played football.
Right.
And so I was one of the rare guys. So I ended up getting those classes. And, I had a professor, Dr. Sherry Earl, who helped identify what ADD was, and helped me to have the understanding of ADD, because there's such a stigma on ADD and ADHD, which I'm still an advocate for that today. And there were certain things in terms of studying the multiple intelligences there's 9 multiple intelligences out there that understand that people have 3 to 4, geniuses have about 5 to 6. And so when you really look at the multiple intelligences, you really can gain an understanding. Notice I'm using that word understanding again, of people and how they learn and how they may receive information and process information and how they learn.
So I love that your sister was your inspiration to learn this. And obviously she meant a lot to you, because I hate to say that it seems like everything stemmed from your sister, as far as, introducing you to the code, like what an influence she had, positive influence she had on you. As you went through those studies, did it help you understand her conditions better? Like, did it connect you more with her, or
it did, because basically I took every psychology course they had. And so when you kind of have a certain, not necessarily perception, but when you have a certain understanding, your perception and your viewpoint changes. Because now I can understand, okay, there's a cause and effect. Same thing with coaching. Something may happen, a traumatic event may happen, or we may have a very passionate conversation, but then I could kind of pick and choose how I took the conversation, if I wanted to, and if I wanted to end the conversation. So there was minimal conflict, but you still wanted her voice to be heard. And also you didn't want her to feel devalued. And so really with my sister, I was learning to be a coach. Didn't even know it. And I was learning to be a teacher, because Dr. Sherry also was the one, because I went in, like a jock, didn't think I was a jock, but when it was like, man, they talk about writing lesson plans. No, I don't write lesson plans, I write workouts. She said, no. She said, hold up. She said, your workouts are your lesson plans. Your track is your classroom. It's just a non-traditional classroom.
Right.
And once that happened, the floodgates opened up in terms of just trying to learn as much as I could.
Wow, I love that, because you're right. Communication is key. It's interesting how important communication is, and how simple communication can be. And we are definitely here in 2020. We have so many avenues for communication, right? So social media, obviously face-to-face, Zoom calls, things like that. And yet it continues to be one of the hardest things to do and do right is communicate with others.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So I love that. I love that that was your major. And I love that there was so much inspiration from your sister with that. That's so awesome. That was great to learn. So walk us through Sacred Heart for graduate school. Where were some of the next stops as you go from now? I need to find a way to pay for school. Well, now school's done. Talk to us about the actual career of coaching.
Just kind of, really started learning networking from my marketing background. Really supposed to graduate with a degree in marketing and sales. So, but that major was very early. But ended up meeting a guy named, actually our swim coach was knew a guy named Mark Davis, who that name may sound very familiar to you. Yeah. And Mark Davis actually knew Debbie Utesh. And so, that name as well. So my next job was I'm sitting there trying to scramble, go through, and I wasn't coming from a Power 5. I came from a mid-major or a mid is probably the best way to put it. We got some history in Western Carolina. Shout out to Brad Hoover. I know we may not do shout out to Brad Hoover and David Patton. We got Clyde Simmons. We got some Super Bowl champions that came out that piece, right? The gentleman that does the review for officials, he's a West Carolina alum.
Is that right?
Rachel Nichols. Shout out to Rachel Nichols, ESPN. She's from Western Carolina. So, I mean, we're out there. We just like to stay low key and still do our thing. That's what I like to say, right? Stay low key and do our thing. But I knew a guy that knew a guy that knew a guy, as the old saying goes. And I ended up going on to Lehigh and got to be a part of Lehigh. And then from there, I'm one of a rare group of people that actually were able to coach at Lehigh and then turn around and coach at Lafayette.
Why is that so unique?
Because quality is kept outside of Army and Navy. Lehigh and Lafayette is probably the oldest rivalry in college sports.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So, the story happened where they're only about 15 miles apart. And so they used to, I think the story was back in the day, I'm sure these people are not alive right now. They, So they would drop the freshmen off on Lehigh's campus, and they would leave them. And so they had to run all the way back from Lehigh back to Lafayette. I think that's the story. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that's kind of how the first cross-country meets were going on. And they were figuring out whose freshman could run back to campus the fastest. And that's kind of how the rivalry started, right? Yeah. And then and I think it happened way before basketball and football. So you start learning the history. And so then went from there into Pennsylvania on down to Davidson College. So was down there during the Steph years. Shout out to Steph Curry and and Dale and his mom. Great people. Learned a lot of good stuff from Gary Andrews. Mm-hmm. And so went from there pretty quickly up to got a chance to be a head coach at 31 to Virginia State. So shout out to the Trojans, and was able to kind of really see things in a different level on that.
Yeah, I'm always interested in, we get a lot of coaches, very few of us will actually go on and become head coaches, right? There's only so many slots for head coaches when there's, maybe 3 to 4 times more slots for assistant coaches. What did you learn? You've got a pretty good history up to this point of, you're in it, right? You know what it means to be a track coach. It's your career at this point, and then you become a head coach. What were some things that changed that kind of maybe took you by surprise? You didn't realize you were going to have to do X, or you're going to be responsible for Y.
Walking in and having 4 sheets of paper handed to you saying, this is your roster, your very first day on the job, it changes things completely. And that was the calmest day of being a head coach outside of sleeping. And it was like a rocket ship. And so I had to learn a lot of baptism by fire. It's kind of one of those things. We were like the level 1, level 2 in USATF education, right? Mm-hmm. So level 1 gives you the general knowledge of the sport, right? So that it kind of gives you a little snapshot of every single area. But level 2 gets deeper into those areas, into the sciences and this and that with nature. But then when you look at being an assistant coach or you just starting out coaching, and I had a lot of my jobs, when you look at my resume, there were a lot of jobs that shied away from me because they thought, oh, you program hop. And I said, no. I said, a lot of my jobs were minority intern jobs, just like the NFL. They were 1 year or 10-month positions that paid a stipend, no benefit. And so I was coaching for the love of it. Once again,
right.
I was still running post-collegiately. So I was just not really in that mindset of like bills and really trying to pay rent other than just trying to really stay afloat, right?
Yeah, it's like survival mode.
All day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it was, which tied into my mentality of being an athlete still, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from there, going into like really looking at coaching and really having to, even though I made a goal of mine to learn every single event. So I said, eventually, if I want to be a head coach, I said, I never want my assistants to not know about something, or I don't want my athletes to suffer because lack of coaching, lack of knowledge, lack of equipment. And so those are like my three main areas, right? That kind of helped me survive that job. A lot of great successes there, but a ton of failures, but a ton of learning. And it's been able to help transcend into the other, 2/3 of my career I've had so far.
So coaches are famous, and it's true, but they're famous for saying, you don't learn much when you win, you learn more when you lose. You talked about your failures. What is, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here a little bit, Ernest, you mentioned there's a lot of failures there. What's one failure that you can think of that you might share with us that was a big learning for you?
I think having such a big heart, and understanding that everybody's not there for the same purpose. So where we're here at Tiffin, we have about 187 on the roster, right? Which is like a football team. But at Virginia State, we got as high as about 164. And so in the midst of me having to do so many different things, I didn't understand the whole thing of like depth charts and this, that, whatever, because to me, track and field was presented to me as an opportunity sport. And so everybody's opportunity. You can go out there and you can run. You can go out there, you can run, jump, throw. Those are some of those preliminary camps that got out there, right? Run, jump, throw. And so that was my approach. But the problem is, from a business standpoint, not a good decision. Because now what's going on is because I knew so much about each event, and I'm a technically minded person, so I'm really OC about technique, especially from a safety standpoint. I was trying to get everybody to be that technical athlete like me. You can't do that with 176 people.
Well, I was going to say, how in the world would you do that?
Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. And so my athletic director tried to work very well with me and show me certain different things. Basketball was kind of her background, but it really just showed me like everything ain't for everybody. But that took me 5 or 6 years to understand that. I was a little young. I kind of relate that coaching experience is like when John Gruden first went into the NFL as a head coach, and he's kind of at Tampa Bay, and he kind of fell miserably a little bit, right? So he started really hot. But I mean, we came out of there. We had, I maintained, the conference championship. We won my first year in, men's and women's, first time in school history together.
Wow.
And then followed back up and did what we call the trifecta. So we ended up having Hoover Taylor. He ended up winning the CIAA championship in the high jump, ended up going and winning the Penn Relays championship in the high jump. A lot of people can't say that.
Yeah.
Penn Relays champion. We beat we beat the star freshman that was at Texas at the time. I think he ended up being NCAA champion. Wow. I don't know if that was Jesse Williams or not, but then he also ended up winning Division II national championship in the high jump.
Wow.
So only to finish on a high note, so learned a lot. But we were on paper pretty successful.
So with over 150, pushing 170, 180 kids at Virginia State at their high point, how many coaches did you have to do that? Oh, I tell you, because you mentioned it's, your roster size is a lot like football. Football will have 100 plus almost every campus, right? That I can think of anyway. And, they've got, it almost seems like they have a tackles coach, a guards coach, a center coach, a tight end coach, a outside receiver coach, inside receiver. I mean, they've got so many coaches, and they should. I'm not a guy who talks about taking away from other sports so that we can have more for track. I'm more of a let's grow track. I cannot believe one full-time coach for that many kids. It's really a disservice to the kids as well as the coach who, pull your hair out. kind of thing.
It was, and I think, part of it was, like I said, my youth, and just understanding networking and the process of trying to look those in the coach, but also trying to get the job done. Because
Right.
my schedule one time would be 6 a.m. practice for the cross country kids, or I would do fall training for the track kids early in the morning, and then turn back around and do cross country that was in season in the afternoon, then flip back around. So really, I mean, a lot of the work ethic and the hard work ethic came from my upbringing and just my dad. He would work 3 shifts in a row, at the factory. And so I just kind of took that mentality and just knew it was there. Now, would I do that all over again? No. And so, we had some times to try and interview some people. But, when you're not in full control of the process, you just understand procedure and protocol. And sometimes procedure and protocol doesn't always fit the person, but you still got to follow procedure and protocol.
Yeah, good points. So you end up winning conference at Virginia State. That's awesome. That's a high note for sure. Where did it take you after that? Where did you go from Virginia State?
Went down to Radford and ended up, working with some great people, being around some great people. Ended up coaching probably 2 of the shortest jumpers in the Southeast, to doing some great things. Antonio Miller, who is now running a track club in Virginia, was every bit of about 5'5", and he ended up going I think 48, some change indoors.
Wow.
Then we had a young lady named Nikki Roseberry, who also certain schools turned her down because of her height and everything, but she ended up jumping 5'8" and 3/4, probably at least 11 to 12 times.
Wow.
And she was really, I don't think she was 5'2". She might have been 5 feet tall.
Is that right?
But the trick was she was a world-class sorter. So because of all the years of riding the horses and understanding how the adductors work, she was doing a lot of concentric, eccentric strength training continuously. And so you're able to take that and transfer that into a vertical lift.
Wait, say that again. You said she was a world-class
sorter. So sorting basically, she rides horses and she sorts different, we got lambs or sheep, those kind of things.
Oh, really?
So it's called sorting. Yeah. She was a world-class sorter. Still does it.
So, and I love the stuff that is unexpected, right? So, we're here on Track and Field podcast, and we end up learning an athlete who 5'8", by the way, in a high jump, nothing to sniff at. That's big, man. I'll take that. I'll take that any day, right?
Yeah.
But she's a world-class sorter. So on the horse, and she makes sheep go one way and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So basically she was trying to take the sheep and actually sort them like a cowgirl, cowboy.
Yeah. That's a good way. Yeah.
So that's one of the competition. You have the bell race and everything like that. So
that's crazy.
Yeah,
man. The most unique I ever had. I had a really, really good quarter miler that I recruited at Ball State, and she was from Ohio, from Worthington, Ohio.
Okay.
And her and her dad and her sister were big time, if I remember correctly. I almost said not ping pong, racquetball players.
Hey, I love racquetball.
Is that right? I've never played, and so it was fascinating.
We'll teach you.
Our my recruiting calls and visits was we didn't talk track. I was like, tell me more about this rack. I mean, I see it on TV stuff, but I don't know what it is. It was so interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, racquetball is a very, very fun sport, and then now I guess it's now transcending into pickleball a little bit. For the older crowd, pickleball is pretty big. I just call that full court ping pong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything against it, because I mean, down in my hometown, there's a nationally ranked pickleball player. He's actually number 1 in his age group. So
pickleball's big, yeah. And I love ping pong. So to me, saying it's full court ping pong, I love that, because I love ping pong. So that's a good way of.
We'll get you some rackets and pickleballs. I'm going back to the racquetball room, or I'm playing squash or handball.
See, I don't know what is squash and I think I know handball. I've seen it in the documentaries about New York City and stuff like that. So it's literally your hand and you're hitting it. But what is squash?
Squash, believe it or not, was a game that the Sheiks played over in Pakistan, and I actually taught the class. So this is why I know the history. So you're like, this man know all, right?
I was gonna ask him, wait a minute.
We ain't ready for Jeopardy by no means. We ain't going on Jeopardy. But I'll be in the negative so bad, my mom will be like, "My baby's a dummy." So I'm like, so it came from the regions where there wasn't a lot of good. It was too hot, So they had to figure out a way to go and play something athletically. So they came up with this game, squash, to play in these rooms. And so when you look at the world-class squash tournaments, they're in a clear room and there's certain lines on it, and they're hitting this small rubber ball. There's different densities of it that you can kind of hit around. It has a longer racket. It looks like a badminton racket, but it's really like a cross. If a tennis racket and a badminton racket kind of made a child, that's a squash racket, right? And so it gets pretty big. It gets pretty intense.
Well, what you described sounds like what I have in my head for racquetball, though, in a room with all these lines.
Just about a couple of changes in the rules, the court's the same, except on the front wall where you got to hit it above a line, and you got like, after that one bounce, it dies completely. As opposed to racquetball, I'm a Z-shot it. I'm gonna hit it up around the ceiling, around the world, hit you with a little corner kill. You know, you can't hit the corner, so you really got to change it up. It's a little bit more leveled up. A little bit close to tennis, right?
Listening to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast, it's going to help you with Jeopardy, with your trivia night. Maybe you're going to play Trivia Pursuit with your family. You are going to understand Z shots and around the world and hitting you with
all day.
Shot, all because you listened to track coaches, man. That's awesome. I love that. Okay, but let's get back to track, because that's as much as squash and racquetball. Track it's way up here, right? That's way more interesting, at least for me. So where were we at? You were at Radford, coaching at Radford. Some great jumpers there. Keep going for us.
Went back to West Carolina. Got a chance to really work with my alma mater. And shout out to Danny Williamson, a great coach, great guy, great mentor, father, friend, and was able to actually get my first women's conference championship in terms of really at Western. And that was the same first championship he got at Western. So it was always good to kind of pay homage to him with that. Because I missed my conference championship when I had hip surgery because the men won it. But it was good to get the women. Then was able to have an opportunity. He helped me get the job at Toledo. And so actually had a chance to be as close to the Power Five as you could be and experience the world of Toledo and MAC football and basketball and, coaches out there, at Iowa State, a great guy. I got to talk with him, and he was young, but just to see him elevate and how he carried himself. Then I think that's when I really started to look at coaching differently.
That's interesting, because you're 10 years in at this point.
I was 13 years in, 14 years in.
What was changing? What was being looked at differently?
What was changing? Well, I guess just, had already experienced some success. But I'll use a line from Steve Harvey. He said he had all the success, but he wasn't enjoying it. So when you look back and you look on the resume, you see conference champion this, regional qualifier there, school records here. I wasn't really enjoying it because I didn't, outside of the training, I didn't see any kind of forecasting. And so in the midst of being there at Toledo, I started to talk with, when you have a chance to talk to the king and the queen, the head football coach and the head women's basketball coach, Trish Killip out at University of Toledo, and to see what they were able to do and command and how they commanded their athletes. I mean, my number one coach of all time is Pat Summitt. Number two is Mike Kay. Sorry, Mike, but I mean, and then you go Gino and Bob Knight and all those guys, right? And so I'm not a literary person. I'm a verbal and an auditory kind of learner, as well as visual. And so I began to just have conversations, if they allow me to just talk with great coaches or coaches that were still on the rise, and even starting to look at myself. I used to look myself down a little bit and saying, I'm not on that level yet. I'm not on that level yet. And that's what I said when I turned around and I started thinking for a minute. I said, wait a minute, I've been doing this for 15 years. Right. So I'm like, wow, 15 years, right?
Blink and there it is.
Yeah, right. And so I'm like, okay, and was able to do some great things there, negotiate some things again, like at Virginia State was able to build a track, was able to do some renovations to their javelin runway, right? Redo uniform orders, and then come to like Toledo and have to order literally every piece of equipment you could think of for a track meet. Right. And then negotiate a discount on that deal in one swipe, but then also still try and be the meet director for the conference championship. Right. And so, you get to deal with some good, passionate coaches, like Lawson out of Kent State and
I can't believe I haven't had Lawson.
and Dennis Mitchell and
Dennis,
Akron.
passionate, great
And,
people.
you know, but also just by being there, it got me connected. You'll know this man, Joe Rogers. You know, I got to talk about with Joe Rogers. So when I was in the Major League, I got to see Joe Rogers at West Point. You know, and just once again, and then have him as my level 2 instructor, fast forwarding from Toledo down to Marian in Indianapolis, and was able to really interact with Mike Holman.
Another great guy.
Another great guy, didn't realize the connect. And all the while, here we go now, a couple meets, probably was at Toledo, went down to meet at Finley, Mark Farsi, you know, shout out to Farsi. As a great guy. If he was coaching again, I'm gonna beat him. You know, I'm gonna try and beat him just because I'm a coach. You know, it's kind of like Rocky and Apollo, right? That's really gotta look at the profession. But then you look at, but I'd always pass a guy named Jeremy Croy in a school named Tiffin. And a lot of my schools I worked at, most people had never heard of, but they've always had some rich history. Then all of a sudden, out the blue, while I was down at Marian, a school named Tiffin University decides to win the NCAA National Championship.
Yeah.
The shot heard around the world in 2016.
Yeah.
And so have an opportunity to be able to come and work with a great staff here at Tiffin. We're great coaches, but we're also great people. And we talk on a daily basis, open door policy. We have great relationships with our kids. And I think that's really where the meat of coaching comes now. It needs to be about relationships, it needs to be about collaboration, it needs to be about understanding. And I think if you go with those 3 things in there, along with the knowledge of the sport, then you're gonna be pretty good because you can always learn more.
So you're just finishing up. This past season was your 20th year coaching?
Yep.
And maybe if you look at, you said about year 13, things kind of changed for you. So maybe this is your 7th year coaching in a whole different
rebirth.
Rebirth, if you will. Right. So let's talk about, because you said something real interesting about that major, and you've been using the word understanding, which we want to get into. We talked about the multiple intelligences, and you know that the average person, I think you said, has 2, 3, or 4, and then the quote unquote geniuses, you know, have 5, 6, 7. You talked about, when I hear that, I think about when you're teaching people, and you actually alluded to this as well. You know, some people learn better visually, some people learn better auditorily. So, you know, as a teacher and as a coach, sometimes you have to show film to kids. Some kids you need to show more film to. Some kids you need to talk more. You have to explain it more to them. Some kids you have to drill. You have to show the drill, things like that. They're each person, they're unique people, and they learn uniquely. It made me think of that aspect when you talked about these multiple intelligences. Am I connecting dots here, or am I
all day? So spot on. I mean, you know, if somebody's linguistic, you kind of gotta show them something that they can read, or you gotta kind of, you know, with me, I talk very, very fast and a lot. So it does somebody coaching, but sometimes it can be a big Achilles heel. So I have to try and talk with them and make it a collaboration to where it has to become their idea. And it may take a while.
Now that's okay. So there's a lot of branches to take here, but one of the things you just said there to explore, you talked about how you're a fast talker. I think a lot of it has to do, from my relationship with you and knowledge of you, is I think it has to do, your brain kind of goes a little bit like 100 miles per hour as well. So sometimes there's no speed bump for you from your brain to your mouth. So you go, and I don't mean that negatively, but like it just spills out sometimes. There's a lot of things that come out. What responsibility is it, do you think, for the coach versus the athlete? So is it the athlete's responsibility to learn to listen to that 100 miles per hour, or is there more responsibility on the coach, the teacher, to realize, this athlete, or this section of my athletes, I've got to slow down or back up my 100 miles per hour with visuals? Whose responsibility is it here?
A little bit of both, but I think one, because the coach is in a position of power, and they have to approach the understanding as if the student athlete doesn't understand, you know, what's going on. So when I was in the younger part of my career, they would say, you know, as a young coach, you want everybody to love the sport like you do. But some people may be doing it for different reasons. Help pay for school, as a part-time job. And that was promoted to me from Coach Steele that, you know, you're going to school to be a track athlete. No, it was this could help you pay for school. That's the way it was presented to us, like a part-time job. from other mentors that mentioned something like that to me. So what I ended up having to do is learn this understanding, this principle that when the athlete doesn't have the same kind of passion and drive as you do, then you and Tel must become the teacher and teach them why this is important for them to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So I relate, if you go and if you look at my resume, it'll say something like, as you learn more about the sport of track and field, as it's related to life, you will learn to appreciate both. Because there's a lot that you can learn from being an athlete and how you accomplish things in life. And I think in today's times, we're dealing with, and maybe we'll tag this, we're dealing with the, give it to them kind of generation. Oh, so-and-so's crying, we'll just give it to them. Oh, well, so-and-so just became a kid. Oh, give them a pair of Jordans, give them a onesie, because we want them to look a certain way, but we never taught them to value it. So the aspect of responsibility, the aspect of accountability, the aspect of learning has become devalued more and more and more. I always joke now, I tell them I'm old enough to where I tell them the internet was created in the second semester of my freshman year in 1996.
Right here.
Another Jeopardy moment. Another Jeopardy moment, right?
Yeah, it was actually, there's plenty of fascinating books, but one of the first internets was right here at University of Illinois, right in the basement. They created the internet right here in little old Champaign, Illinois. It's yeah, it's fascinating. I'll give you your Jeopardy. You've been giving me so many good Jeopardy moments. And of course I'm blanking on the author's name. He wrote the big Steve Jobs book, the one that like 600 pages. Oh gosh, he's awesome. So he also did Benjamin Franklin and a couple others. They're amazing. Albert Einstein, but he also did one called Innovators of Computer. So he talks about how a computer was made, computer language, and then of course internet and stuff like that. And it is fascinating. And I'm terribly embarrassed that I cannot think of his name. Walter Isaacson, that's the author's name. So all of his books are like 600 pages, except for this one, this
We'll be reading them, but we'll listen to them maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not a reader. Yeah. But audiobooks today, man, almost every book is an audio form and things like that. So I
read in short spurts. I read in short spurts. I had to learn, you learn to adapt, right? So I read in short spurts. And thank you, Mike Holman, for giving me that little, and I teach my students, athletes to this day, like, hey, commit yourself to 15 minutes. We're short-minded kind of creatures because that's how we were trained. So engage for 15 minutes, take a break, then come back, engage again for 15 minutes. And that correlates with what we do in the sport of track and field.
Yeah, I think, you're hitting on something there about athletes and coaches, they're so driven and so competitive. I think sometimes we think, like with reading as the example, like, oh, if I can't sit down and read for an hour, or if I can't sit down and read the whole book, well, then I'm failing. So then I just won't do it. And I don't mean that in negative, like, oh, then I don't try things that are hard for me. But I think we forget and tend to that aspect of 15 minutes at a time. Like you don't have to set the world record all at one time. You train, a day at a time. So same thing with reading. Instead of trying to read the whole book or read for an hour, sit down, put you a 15-minute time limit, read for 15, put it down and go do something else. That style of learning, we sometimes don't think about it that way because we're just so competitive. We just want to get on the runway and jump, or we want to get on the track and race the whole 400. We're just so driven in that aspect that we forget about chunking things and learning that way.
Yeah, really it is. I mean, and I think that's how my approach has been different in my first 10 years to now in my last 10 years in terms of just my approach to coaching, my approach to the sport, my approach to learning, adopting certain lingo, so I sound, professional with my compatriots in USATF and USFTF, CCCCCA. It's like you're rapping. And then, Division I, Division II, NAIA, and then going and trying to speak with first year athletes that were self-coached their whole career. We're doing a lot of that with the YouTube and a lot of these speed trainers and a lot of these athletes that have become so specialized. I think we over specialize instead of just being very generalized. So when people come into my fall and look at my fall training, it's very generalized, but it's very specific in terms of I'm going to train the body that I want to be able to eventually use, as opposed to just I want to test. I want to run you really fast. I want to jump you really far. No, different kind of body because we didn't understand the trends from brittle bone syndrome to now the couch potato to just sitting with the, arcade. Their hands are stronger than their feet.
Yeah, right.
That's why we have a lot of anterior shin problems, right?
Yeah.
Or a lot of shin splints. So I trained the ankles, I trained the joints, I trained the lower back, the hips. We implement yoga. I just wrote a yoga 2 weeks ago that is track specific. It may be not the typical name of a yoga movement, but you come and you see it. Oh, it gets them all nicely wounded up, and yoga's now been moving into sports. So we're still following the trends and still going current, but still bringing a little bit of that old school flavor.
Well, tell me more about that. So you've done 20 years now, and obviously your education continues to get better as you not only do coaches ed, you mentioned level 1 and level 2, and USTIFCA has a great coaching education course. You seem like, and I know you well enough to know this is true, a guy that seeks out others that know more than you, guys and gals that have done it for longer. And I love you've actually mentioned, you may have mentioned more other sport coaches, football and basketball, than you have track. So it seems like your ego is not so large that you don't seek counsel and mentorship from outside of our sport as well.
Sure.
What has changed for you? Not the athletes. We talked a little bit about the athletes have changed over the last 20 years. When you look back at year 1 of your coaching career to year 20, how have you changed? Or have you not? Are you still doing the same things and the same mentality?
Oh, no, no. If I was the same way as when I first came out, it'd be implosion. It'd be like the Hindenburg going down, right?
You might not be a Tiffin, is what you're saying.
No, by no means. By no means. I think what's funny is in my recruiting spiel last year, while working here at Tiffin, because every recruiting spiel is different, to even this year, if I have 20 athletes, at any given point in time, I may have a base plan, but I may have 20 different individual, specialized kind of different things within the day. And so if I didn't understand the management of it and the management of the athlete and the management of the group that I learned from other coaches, and they were track coaches who taught me this, as well as being able to watch other great coaches that were championship-oriented coaches, then I wouldn't be able to know how to manage my group. I wouldn't know how to manage the workout. Now, from an administration standpoint, a lot of coaches you hear on TV, they hate paperwork. I do too, but you have to do it, but I hate paperwork, right? Mm-hmm. But so I still enjoy, like Joe Paterno said, his favorite part of the day is going to practice. It's his favorite part of the day. And I heard that from Julio Piazza. It's his favorite part of the day. My favorite part of the day is going to practice. Only difference is now with the pandemic, instead of going to practice, we're going to practices. We're going to like 4, 5, 6 practices. And we're working, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of practice. And so the body ain't what it used to be, and so we're great to have a great facility and great things provided for us to provide for the kids, but you never can replace the brain. And I always approach it as, what if you didn't have this? How do you do it? My very first level 1 class was with Jen Potter, Larry Judge, Diane Woolley, Gary Winkler, not Gary Winkler, Gary, the Minnesota high school coach. Up and that won a lot of cross country championships.
Christensen.
Yeah. Scott Christensen.
Yeah.
That was my very first level 1 class. You talking about being lucky or blessed?
Dude.
That's some heavy hitters, right? Those some heavy hitters. That was my level 1 class in Long Island.
Wow. Yeah. Scott Christensen, Stillwater High School. Yeah.
So I mean, like
guy.
To get started like that, but then our approach was, this is before all these great inventions that are out there that can really help you out. Mm-hmm. But if you ain't got the budget, how do you do it?
Right.
If you ain't got the facility, how do you do it? Like I said, once again, so I do this the same. I never let the lack of coaching, the lack of knowledge, the lack of equipment or facilities to prevent my student athletes from accomplishing what they need to do. And Jeremy Curry did the same thing. When you look at his story, I evolved the program from Tiffin. Mm-hmm. And you taught his first classes, 20 years ago, right? So, I mean, it's the same approach. I still do old school. I'm a firm believer of old school training. Yeah, and I think that there's always this underwritten thing that we kind of look at European style training and still try and implement it into domestic athletes. So instead of me sitting there just sitting at home all the time, you look at it, you look at some certain nuances of it and see how it can apply. And it really just comes with the lifestyle. So if they didn't come from that environment, you have to create that culture. So now we started talking about the word culture, and you hear it, but you didn't really know what it meant. So the culture in my training is completely different than any other person's culture. You can come and watch my training now, and I may post videos up. I'm just not giving you the workout. You can come and watch. And every coach that's pretty good does that. I mean, I'm not really doing anything innovative. It's the same stuff, right? It's just I may put it over here, may put it over there, and I may understand where that may have came from and how I want to do it, because we're training toward a purpose. We're training toward a goal. I changed the verbiage instead of saying just goal setting. No, purpose setting. What's your purpose today? What's your purpose in approaching the day? What's your purpose in approaching a workout? Right? It's a lot of the same stuff that from level 1 and level 2 education and other things. I just say it differently to where they're going to understand it. What's your intent when you're coming in to practice today? From how you slept the night before, how you ate, how you recovered the day before, and then what's your purpose in doing this right now? And explain to them this is the purpose and why we're doing it. And that's how you gain that relationship.
So there are some tremendous podcasts and education for coaching the jumper and the sprinter and the hurdler and what have you, right? Our purpose here on the Connections podcast is to talk about the coach. So I'm going to turn what you just said there around about how you coach your athletes. I'm going to turn it to you, Ernest. So you talked about what is your goal setting? What is your purpose setting? What do you, as you look at 20 years, and man, I know that seems like a long time, right? I mean, you talk about 20 years, like that's a long time coaching. You are, we are either the same age or roughly the same age. I think I got you by 2 years. I think I'm 2 years older than you.
77, last good year disco, baby.
Okay, 1 year. I'm 76. Okay, all right. So, but as 43, 44-year-olds, we have a long runway in front of us. We are no longer by means close to retiring. And maybe with the financial scope of life, we ain't ever retired. Maybe, I don't know. I hope you do. I don't think I'll ever be able to retire.
I'm just working.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Too much to do.
So what is, as you look at 20 years behind you and you got at least 20 years in front of you, what for you, coach, what is your purpose goals? What is your goal setting, your purpose setting for career development, for coaching?
In 2004, I had a conversation with a guy named Raymond Brewer. Great friend of mine now. We were huge rivals in college because he went to Appalachian State. But it took me 2 weeks to talk to him, and just because of the whole robbery thing, right? You just didn't realize how put on your brain is, right? And so I said, I think that my profession was really chosen for me by God. So I said, okay, well, I'm not a minister by no means. I'm a very spiritual guy. And I just said, God, I'm gonna do this for you. And now in the midst of saying that, the next 16 years, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of valleys, a lot of this, a lot of that. And I'm gonna give a shout out to my Pastor Stephen Furtick out of Elevation Church, and Pastor Chet Pete, down in University City. During this pandemic and even through my journey, I actually took a hiatus from coaching for 6 months to go home and address an uncle who I was named after who had dementia, and so because of going at that point in time, 19 years into my career, there's a lot of stuff with family you miss. And you hear the story about coaches that they feel like they regret they missed a lot, their kids' lives or their family's lives, stuff like that. That was one of those kind of lift the head moments. I think once I turned, 20, I was just, I didn't care. I can conquer the world. 30 years old, still pretty fit. I'm like, yeah, I know this stuff now. Soon as you hit 40, it's like you're watching Marley and Me in the Hallmark Channel all day. You just cry for no reason. Well, I'm not crying. My eyes is moist. The wind is blowing. I got dirt over here, right?
Isn't that funny? Life starts at 40, right? And
Yes.
when we were 20 years old, we looked at 40-year-olds and we're like, oh my goodness.
Oh man, you're old.
That dude's almost dead. Like that dude has one foot in the grave at 40 years
Yes.
old. And now we're 40. We're like, oh, life's just beginning. I'm finally
All day.
understanding a little bit.
Oh yeah, everything that you kind of heard, you're like, oh, I get it. And then like you said, you go back to the moments like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this when I was this age, and I can't believe I coached like this. I said it this way, I did it that way.
Right.
One of my dear friends, and a lot of people say I drop names. No, I'm not just dropping names. Like these are people that really helped make me who I am. So why not drop their name?
Right.
Randy and great coaches, right? Because if you go on and if you look up the name, you're gonna see they got success. Randy Gillian, I remember calling him up one time and you always try and serve the boss, right? So I'm trying to make sure that whatever my boss wants, I'm trying to give it to him. So at the time I got some bad advice from a boss, and he said, well, they look tired. I think they need a little bit more conditioning. That was the wrong thing to tell me, because I was like, oh, okay, my boss said we need more mileage. So I started writing these workouts. So all of a sudden I'm like, they're running slower or this, that, whatever. And so I call them up, hey, just checking in. What's up, brother? How you doing? We good, man? And I said, hey, I'm trying to get some things here. You was at Illinois at the time, right? And he was rolling. And I said, what you got? What's up? And he said, well, tell me what your week was like, right? I said, well, I got it right here. And he said, bruh, they did 4 days worth of work in 2 days. So I'm not gonna mention the school I was at, not gonna mention the but and he said, no, this is what you need. And before I even did my level 2 in sprints, hurdles, and relays, I already had my level 2 in the jumps. And I was a jumper hurdler by trade, right? So, but the level of understanding, I knew a ton about the jumps, but didn't really embrace, the whole new system of speed training and rest and everything like that. Even this past summer, got to talk to one of the godfathers, I like to call him, Boo Schexnayder. You know what I mean? Like
that is Godfather, absolutely.
I got a ton of curriculum. So, I got 15 minutes by myself with him at a convention one time, right? And I was like, man, I'm super excited. I got fanned up and everything. And then all of a sudden, when I asked him a question like that, his answer took 10 seconds. And I'm sitting there like walking away like, that just happened, right? Like, and then even this summer, I got to listen to him a good little bit, and so you're always learning, you hear from great guys, Curtis Fry, he said, if I can go to convention and learn at least one thing, and I knew Curtis Fry when he was out at Chapel Hill, right? And then even from there, learned history about when he was coaching in the high school ranks. So, I've been, like I said, my path was already charted for me. Mentors had already come in front of me. Just at certain times, I did not realize I was being mentored, and I didn't realize how to receive it, right? So, like, we were at the Armory one time, and I was sitting with Curtis Fry, and I'm sitting there at the school. I was just in the Army because my school happened to be in the Northeast. We ain't had that heat, So this is when he had the five. This is when he had Dumas and the Barber sisters from Montclair and Demetri Washington, Alexis Joy. That's when he had the killers, right? So So I'm sitting there and I'm talking to one of them, and we're just kind of watching everybody move around. And he said, a lot of young coaches create a lot of opportunities for themselves, but they don't know how to take advantage of them. So you're talking about aha moment for me right now in the Jeopardy.
I was going to say that again. I want people to hear that. Say that again.
A lot of young coaches create opportunities for themselves, but they don't know how to take advantage of them.
So what do you mean by that? What you said that was an aha moment?
It's an aha moment because in the midst of it, that's when you start going back, looking like Virginia State, and you go back and look at all the jobs I worked, really. It wasn't just one particular job that sticks out, all the different jobs, and looking at the different opportunities and opportunities were, each of them were different. So there's not like no perfect answer for that. But I think just listening, as much as I talk, I actually had a boss that told me, said, I realize this is going to be weird when I tell you this. I actually listen with my mouth, which is weird because I always say to my mother, if God intended us to listen with our mouth, he would have put our ears in our throat, right? So that's one of those.
Thanks for that imagery.
that's one of those Moss-isms. If you talk to some of the guys from Davidson, they had a quote board of Moss-isms and one-liners, right? So, but I adapt a little bit now to where even you hear me now pausing a little bit. Now, it's still, to some people may seem like I'm not pausing at all, but I'm pausing a lot more now than I was 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And I'm pausing because, like I said, another shout out to Giulio Piazza. He always had a habit of kind of doing this. And he would breathe like long. And me, 23, like, right? And then the athletes are like, and so I had a, I mean, it's the truth though, right? Like the camera, like, right? So you're sitting there, and he would say, write your workouts and hand them to me. And I ran in the workouts, and he would chop them up. And I'm in there filming like, this is good stuff. Like I even tried to write it like his word, because he would first give me some of his, and then he was training me the right way, right? Preparing me the right way. And so he would chop it up. I'm like, wait a minute, man. So finally came, he said, you could tell I was frustrated. He said, come into the office. So we sat down, and he always would sit back like, and any kind of old man stereotype you could think of, it was him. Grumpier old man, Giulio Piazza, but heck of a guy, love him to death. You know, he got to be around Matt Centrowitz too. Got to drop him in there too. So got to see those two at the same time, right? Yeah. And so I had to see little Matty, run around, little junior, but he had said, I know people are aggravated when I take my breath. He said, I see them. And he said, I do it for a reason. So that if I take a breath, it gives me a moment to think about what I'm about to say and make sure that what I say comes out correctly. Now, granted, in the moment still young, and I was like, oh, he's butthole, but that's one of the things that I took with me that I've taken throughout my whole career, still working on it. And the cool thing about it is some people always want to get it. Like this generation, they want it right now. I want it right now. Instead of like, well, are you better than you used to be at it?
Right.
And so it changes your approach, right? It changes your viewpoint. One of my other one-liners, I say, if your head is down and you're grinding, you change how you look at the milk in the glass. And I'll expand upon that in the sense of saying, if your head is down, the glass always looks half empty. But if you lift your head up and look around you and realize and change your viewpoint, the glass is actually half full. So in the midst of grinding, my first 10 to 12 to 13 to 14 years, I didn't look up. I'm just trying to grind, but you kind of think of, I didn't have the full-time job, didn't have the benefits, but still had a job, and I'm just trying to work, and I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to do this. Oh, I need level 1, I need level 2. I never was really, and even I have my own coaching style, I never was really trying to understand what is the full package, so that when you have to give advice to people, even though I was giving advice to people, how's it going to be? So now when I have people that call me up and I'm talking to them, I'm saying a lot of the same stuff repetitively. Now you start understanding this is the meat, and it evolves eventually. Now you start saying, oh, at 40 is when I started coaching. At 23, I'm much different now. The conversations with the athletes are much different now. Instead of saying, oh, just go do it. I promise it's going to work. Just go do it. That don't always work.
Right. I love that example of coach sitting back and taking that deep breath. I recently read an article about answering questions more empathetically, being more empathetic, right?
Be honest. Yeah, you got to be honest with them now.
Yeah.
Transparency.
I struggle sometimes with that empathy side. Sometimes I'm a little bit more too much on the direct and business and get it done type of side. And this article was talking about the research of pausing for a few seconds before you answer, even though you know the answer, even though you know possibly how you're going to answer the question or the situation. And the examples that this article gave was talks from Steve Jobs, and I believe Elon Musk was the other one. And the Steve Jobs one really sticks out. No, it was Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. That's what it was. And, and I think it was Bill Gates one that sticks out, where someone in the audience asked Bill a question about, like, what do you do? Like he was kind of confronting Bill of like, you've just wasted a lot of time, or you made mistakes with this Microsoft system, whatever. And Bill paused. He knew the answer. He knew all the engineers at Microsoft that have been working on this and things like, he knew it. I mean, no one knows it better than Bill freaking Gates, right? But he paused and was able to give a much more empathetic answer of to help that guy understand, like, hey, we certainly make mistakes. Like that's like if you want perfection, that's not, there is nothing for perfection, right? But I really took to heart about that, that pause before you answer questions. I sometimes for myself, I have to slow down to help other people understand what I'm trying to convey.
Same.
Yeah, right. I'm hearing a lot of same.
And it's still like I said, it's still a work in process. Like that's one of those things. I'm like, oh, I just realized this like maybe like last year, where did you feel like they had a good meeting, or do you feel like you had a good meeting, or did they feel like they had a good meeting?
Oh, wow. What a great question to ask yourself, right? That's really good. Yeah. Was the meeting good because it was good, I got all my views out, or did the person I'm trying to help improve, my athlete, did they have a good meeting? That's a really good question. You touched on mentors. How has the role of mentors changed for you as well? You've had some amazing people in your life, inside of track, family, outside of track with other sports. How has the role of mentors changed over these past 20 years for you?
I think I've been very blessed. This is one of the things when I was away for 6 months and I was doing some odd end jobs, just trying to, be around for family and stuff. and then had opportunity to say, okay, maybe I want to step back into it. And my mentors, I talked to the last 4 or 5 Olympic coaches in the last 10 years, like in face to face, not just like, oh, I need to just want to touch the hem of your garment kind of thing, right? Or the hem of your track jacket, right? But just talk to them as people. And I feel like, I was valued because I was able to participate. Before you just wanted to say, "Ooh, I said, hey," as opposed to like, I'm actually sitting there having a conversation with you and really listening to them. Like, sometimes I get them on the phone and there's people, and even though we would say the line about like, you go over there and we're racing against the Power Fives and we're at a smaller school and you're like, man, these people are world class. And like, they're still people. Right. And so I used this the other day in class. I said, we devalue the humanistic value of living. Right. So we're humans, we're in a time of uncertainty. We're in a time of the pandemic. And we had opportunity, to be able to talk with some other coaches. And I'll just say it like that, opportunities were created for other coaches to talk with each other. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And then of course it changed. I think it became more business oriented than anything else. And I'll leave it there. Mm-hmm. But the organicness of coaching to me is not left. And so being able to speak with people who equally speak organically. And then on top of, you start looking at, wow, certain people, coaches are putting, scriptures on on their Facebook posts. And it's not that they were sitting there like trying to show off, like this was legit, this is real. And they've coached in some pretty intense environments. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not saying that you have to be a Christian to be a coach. What I'm saying is that if you don't have some kind of solid foundation that you're rooted in, you're going to not know how to deal with failure. You're not going to know how to accomplish problem solving. That's what we do as coaches. We're problem solvers. Mm-hmm. Our workouts is the map. The year is the road. And then when you take the philosophy that I learned, take away the bonuses, you hope throughout the year you have not that many takeaways, a couple bonuses, and you playing par golf. Right. And then you do it again. But then you get to a point where, this may sound a little cocky, but after you won 10 conference championships coaching, which some coaches don't even get one, or they try and get one. I've been a part of 10, right? Or even coaching a national champion. A lot of coaches don't do that. How do you do it again? This is where it starts getting fresher to you. How do you do it again? Do you do it with the power side? Do you do it with the endurance side? Do you do it with the balance team? Do you do it with the domestic team? Do you do it with the international team, the transfer team? And so just by talking with mentors and learning and listening to them, processing information and coming back, texting them again, or talking to them again, or reading their post. Mentorship is always have to come from you actually directly talking to the person. Mentorship can sometimes come indirectly from just following them. Mm-hmm. It goes back to what the old saying we learned growing up. In order to be a good leader, you have to learn to be a good what? Follower. Yeah. Now in the early track days, Big time coaches would run from each other. They would never run against each other. Now you've seen the trend over the last 5 to 7 years. They're like, no, let's run. We want to put on a good show for everybody because you're going to make me step my game up. And so now you even see that, and there's 3.5 million high school athletes that graduate every year. So we can't all have it because of budgets or whatever. So I've also got to the point where you start having coaches saying, call you up. This is a sign of respect. Hey, I ain't got no more money. Got this athlete here. They need opportunity. So, and vice versa. Hey, can't really do anything with this athlete. We don't have the major. I know you, because now your name is on that. So now you start valuing your name. You start valuing your product. You start valuing, people calling you up. How are you looked upon as your colleagues in the industry? Are you well respected or not? But my overall purpose now in coaching is I'm involved in the profession, what allows me to help out as many people as I can.
That's a great point. And I got to give a shout out. I just saw this recently with signing day the other day. An athlete from, I'm gonna publicly say it because I put it on my Twitter as well. Just so impressed with the selfless leadership this coach showed. So Alex Heacock, the head coach of William and Mary, which of course has been in the news for bad things and now good things. They've reversed course and they're going to keep their sports, which is the right thing to do. And specifically, they're going to keep their men's indoor and outdoor track program, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Now we've got to work on Clemson and some of the other guys that are doing this crap. But Alex had an athlete transfer from William and Mary to, I believe, UNC. And so UNC put out the tweet about, such athlete, signed with us and whatnot. Alex retweeted that and said, just saying the praises of that kid, said, hey, this is, I wish this kid the best of luck. He's going to do great. I'm glad he landed at UNC, whatever, yada, yada. And I was just so impressed with that leadership because even if, that's obviously who Alex is because he showed it, but even if that was him, he didn't have to publicly state that. He didn't have to. And for whatever reason, this kid's transferring, there's a million reasons a kid can and should possibly transfer schools. But Alex didn't have to publicly get out there and say, hey, we lost a kid. This kid's transferring, and I wish him the best of luck in the world. What a great kid. I just thought that was such amazing.
That is him. I've talked to him.
Leadership.
Yeah, I've talked to him a couple times. We actually had an athlete that kind of, I want to say maybe they left like Toledo, maybe went over to William and Mary because they were just looking for a different environment. And a lot of times, like I just said before, sometimes it's not the coach and it's not the school. It just comes down to simple things like, hey, this is not fitting into my path. But a lot of times, our athletes aren't our possessions. They're human beings first.
Well, I looked at it with that. I look at it as a dad lens now, as a father of little kids, and one day they're going to be in college, and whether they're athletes or not. But I look at like what Alex did there, and I go, man, that's the type of person I want my children to be around, because that guy, Alex, is going to do what's right for my kid, even when it's a detriment to himself. Losing that kid was a detriment to his program, but he seems like he did the right thing to help that kid be successful for the future. And like I said, and to me, and I know we're talking about Alex here because of the recent tweet, but I talk to coaches. This is all I do is I talk to coaches all day, right? I have the greatest job in the world. And there's so many examples of that. That's what I love about our sport and our people who choose to be coaches inside of our sport. Ernest, as we start to wrap up, one of the words that you've said consistently throughout today, and I wanted to make sure we touched on what it meant to you. You've said the word understanding quite often. Talk to me about that there must be there's something special about that word, because you talked about understanding it not in just in the term of what the definition of understanding is, but maybe it goes towards your pedagogy of how you teach or how you live. Talk to me about what understanding means to you.
A little bit of all of that, all in one. When I kind of started on the journey of purpose-driven life, and I think it was a book that was written out about us like that, but trying to understand really what purpose is. One of the ways that I try and approach the day is trying to understand either what the person is going through, has gone through, will go through, what I've gone through, will go through, things of that nature, and try and address the situation. And another shout out even almost to like Mike Holman. He was one of the rare coaches where, a lot of times you always be like, we gotta lift weights, we gotta work out, we gotta lift weights, we gotta work out, to where he had rest built into his program, and not just the day off. What I mean by rest. And so like we wouldn't do anything. And of course, a lot of that came from a lot of the studies he did, him and man and everything like that. So he's really science oriented. So instead of me having to go take a kinesiology class, a physiology class, and have my head hurt, it was daily, and I apologize to him, publicly, but going in and continue to ask him 100 million different questions. And even with, my boss right now, I ask him a ton of questions. My coworkers ask him a ton of questions. That's how I learn. And I think as they adapted to me, they understand, it's not just him just, shooting the day away. It's really him trying to learn in the moment. And so I have to be respectful of their time, don't get me wrong, but also just minimize my questions. But I think just if I can understand more, as opposed to knowing more, if I can understand more, because some of this doesn't come from me. It comes from, my pastor's teaching, but he says, there's some people walk around, they know a lot of stuff, but the practicality and putting it into practice, they don't. So before you hear all these people and you've seen multiple different podcasts or, different varieties, and people just throwing out these big words and vocabularies and this term and that term. And by the time you finish, you have no idea what they just said.
Right.
But that's why I kind of like Boo. Like when I first met Boo, Boo would say all this elite level scientific kind of stuff. And then the first you want to do, you want to go to put the legs right there and put it right up underneath the center of the gravity, and you just go up into the air and you just jump really far. But he spoke 15 minutes before and of all these angles and velocities and percentages, and so
he's an amazing teacher.
Well, that's why he started. So when I did my research on looking him up, he started as a teacher.
Yep.
Was a math teacher, science teacher, or something like that, right?
Something like that, yeah.
And then he kind of drifted into coaching a little bit, and also understand the body, like Mike Boyle. I'll drop that name. Very good guy on biomechanics, and he worked with hockey team and this, that, whatever, right? So I've been around some really good people to really give me a lot of stuff to sift through. And it took me that long to really sift through it, to really try and put a product out there. So when people start saying like, well, what's your training philosophy and what's your training this and whatever, what's funny is there isn't. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's like making a soup, and that's really what it is. We're making soup, and everybody likes soup, right? That's true. It's comforting, it's soothing, but everybody, I think, has to get comfortable being uncomfortable and stepping out of the box and relearning and humbling yourself and humility, even as a coach. Yeah. You can't just approach a first year student by saying, and I change the verbiage, they say freshman, you say first year student, you say newbie, right? Because as soon as they hear freshman, you just given them continuously the mentality of a freshman, and that's your fault. Instead of just calling them a first year student. I used to say, you're a freshman as long as you let somebody call you a freshman. Now I'm to the point where I say first year student. I also teach a gender-based Title IX class, so I understand now a little bit more what Title IX is.
Oh, right.
Human rights, civil rights, women's rights, disability rights, LGBTQ, all these different things. That's the trend. And so if you're just in your sport only, and you're only looking up things that apply to your sport only, you're boxing yourself. What if you have an LGBTQ athlete? How do you address them? What if how do you deal with an athlete that came from a socioeconomic background that you have never been a part of? Right. How do you adapt to them? And that's why I said my purpose is to help out as many people as possible. But in order to help myself and as many people as possible, I have to be exposed to as many people as possible, different outlooks, different backgrounds, right? And have those conversations with them. That's all it is a simple conversation. And then by you having a conversation with them, you now not devalue the person. You've actually uplifted the person. And sometimes if you just uplift the human being, they can do amazing things. I mean, we went 1 through 4 in the long jump at conference. You know, we went, I think like 2, 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm plugging a little bit, right? But 2, 4, like there was like 2, 4, and I think it was like maybe 5 and like 8 in the triple jump on the men's side, right? We had our women have their best performance of the year at conference. People would say, well, you wrote the training for them to hit right then and there. Sometimes training ain't got nothing to do with it. Sometimes it don't. Sometimes it's about understanding. When I look at you in your eyes and I say, make a statement, that one statement just coached them, told them everything they need to know. But there was blocks, building blocks. There were experiences, and every great coach has those moments because you see them from John Wooden to Pat Summitt to Gino to Mike Krzyzewski to a Carroll to a Curtis Fry to a Jeremy Croy or whatever. We're continually coaching, but we also need to be able to receive as well. So I think understand that, but that's the receiving.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you talked about being in a posture of understanding and not always in the posture of I know it. You know, when I look at, and you mentioned a lot of the coaches with the Carrolls and Curtis and Mouse and Flo, you know, the guys and gals that I've seen continually be successful over generations, over decades, I should say. They're the ones that are always, even though they have a system, they're always learning, like, okay, we learn new things about the body on a daily basis. So, okay, what are we putting into place? How do I keep tweaking my system with the new things that we learn? And they realize that the subjects that they're working with, the athletes, they're changing. The athlete that you have today, the 18-year-old you have in 2020 is not the same 18-year-old you had in 2000.
No.
So you've got to continually learn that, and how do you change your teaching or tweak your teaching, I should say, towards that new generation. And I think
you got to be patient. You got to be patient. You got to be patient and let it happen. You know, like you got to understand it. You got to know where you want to be, and you got to know how to think on the fly, and you got to know how to adapt. And on a daily basis, I have 3 workouts in my head. 3. The one I wrote, and then 2 I'm gonna think about when somebody brings a situation in front of me. So you don't know those 2 yet, right?
Right.
And that comes from experience and just being seasoned.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just the truth. I mean, I think just adapting to the athlete we have today.
Well, I think it's pretty clear, Ernest, you know, through the time that I've known you and our time today, looking at your career development and more importantly, your personal development, how you continue to learn how to have a mentor, how to take advantage of that mentor, how to be available for that mentor and learn, as well as the technical, the X's and O's coaching. You know, you continue to develop and continue to get better. I think Tiffin is really lucky to have you, and that's a great program. So that's saying something big, right? I mean, they've had great coaches and have great coaches.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, I'm a Paul Tate. I'm lucky to be a part of Tiffin.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great place. It really is. It's a jewel. Yeah, you know, and we're continually growing, we're evolving. I mean, yes, we've had some excellence, but we have a lot of goals, a lot of things we want to accomplish. So, you know, and we, you know, we're about the relationships. It's not just about the family. You know, we're about the relationships, and you know, people that want to come and kind of look at the school and see what we're doing and how we establish a relationship and how coaches kind of interact with one another. We're all different. Every single one of our coaches are different.
Right.
And I think it allows us to be able to address the large numbers that we have with the diverse population that we have. And I think, like I said, once again, it's about relationships. You know, we have decent aid we can offer people and decent classes, and we're continually growing in the classes. I mean, we were building in the midst of a pandemic. Like you said, we're recruiting in the midst of a pandemic. You know, we care about the person. That's the best. I can't keep helping saying, like, we care about the person, and we're going to teach you your sport. Now, you may not have, you know, national qualifying marks your first year, may not have them your 4 years, but you're going to get better, and you're going to get better not only as an athlete, you're going to get better as a person, and you're going to get a degree.
That's I can't state the importance of that, right? I mean, we're not all going to be Olympians and All-Americans, but if we're in college, we should all be getting better as a person, and academically, we should be earning that degree. And Ernest, man, I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful for our relationship personally, but I'm just thankful that you would join us here today on the Get Athletics Connections podcast. I had a great time learning about your career and really, you know, chopping it up about just coaching mentality and how coaching has evolved for you. I'm just so thankful for you, man.
I'm thankful for you as well, man. I'm very humbled. You know, I mean, a lot of times we talk about training so much that we don't talk about the other parts of coaching.
Yes.
And so I think what you're doing is a great thing. I knew you had been doing it, been watching you from afar, and known you for a long time. And it really wasn't like I'm being interviewed by an investigative reporter. It's more like we're, like you said, we're chopping up. We're friends and everything. So you always got a place over here at Tiffin University. You can come on over here and just chop it up and see some athletics at a high level and see some people just really having fun in the sport in the midst of a pandemic, right? And we're doing everything that we're supposed to from a CDC standpoint, practicing all the guidelines, sanitizing, everything like that. That's something new to add on besides just writing your workouts, taking temperatures at practice, practicing in little small groups. So we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. So you'll be safe to come, and I think, we like to have a season, and I will put the one little general plug out there. I think since the beginning of sports, I think track has always been devalued because we're not a gate sport. And so, but we can bring in numbers that can help populate the schools in a many different ways. I mean, we have 19 events that we can recruit for. So, schools that are having problems with budgets and like that. I mean, we're pushing ahead. We're making ourselves essential, and it's about because we care about the human being, and we want to get an opportunity to get a good education, and then get some good coaching on the side too, and get some rings, and we're gonna win, and we're gonna win a national championship. I mean, that's just what we do.
That's awesome. That's a great way to end it, man. Thank you again, Ernest, so much for being here. Your time and attention is the most valuable thing you can give me, so I do appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Mike. Take care, bro.
That's it, bro.
Go Guns.